Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to talk about a 70s Doctor Who audio story, The Pescatons, Part 1, which of course is included on the Season 14 box set, as it was, I believe, the first Doctor Who audio story, I believe, and it came out in July of 76, I believe. The first 5 minutes of it or so, I really enjoyed. Especially when Tom and Sarah are talking, because it kind of switches between Tom narrating and Tom having an actual conversation with Sarah. Although most of the story, part 1, which part 1's about 22 minutes, is him narrating. But he narrates a little at the beginning, kind of setting up the situation, and then it has him and Sarah talking as they arrive on a beach. And I like that, because it feels like both actors are taking it seriously. Like, neither actor is phoning it in. Tom and Elizabeth are treating this the same way they would an episode of the show. They feel like they're giving 100%, and I like that. I respect that, and I like that, because I'm a big fan of both of these actors. And they really are putting in a professional 100%, in my opinion. I enjoy the little camaraderie we get with them. There is that fun banter that Four and Sarah have. It's very much there. Like, the doctor's asking her, what's that sign say? And she's like, well, if you'll shine your torch on it, what we Americans call a flashlight, you know, I could tell you. And then there's one part where she's like, you're just trying to scare me again. He's like, no, Sarah, be quiet. Don't move. Don't even breathe. It's really nice. And I really like that each actor is giving it the same kind of 100% effort that they would for the show. The problem is after that, right when they start running from a creature, it switches back to Tom narrating, and it pretty much does that for the rest of the story. So Elizabeth's not really in this much. Sarah's not. I'm not even sure where Sarah quite goes. Like, the story jumps around after those first 5 minutes. I feel like maybe I got distracted for like 3 seconds. And then a lot happened, because it goes from them running for the creature. And I did love the little quirk where it likes, which its claws almost caught my scarf 12 or maybe 13 times. It sounds like a very whimsical Fourth Doctor thing to say in a rush, which it's amused me. But then next thing I know, he's talking about, and we met a scientist who said we shouldn't go down there. And I'm descending into the water. And I'm like, wait, what? Did I miss something? Did I get distracted for like 3 seconds and somehow miss a big chapter or something? Like, how did we go from running to the creature to meeting a scientist? Where's Sarah? I don't know where Sarah's gotten to at this point. Sarah just kind of disappears. And he's descending in the water. And then he gets tangled up in, like, at first it's like some kind of seaweed. Then we're running into hybrid fish people that are from another planet. And then he gets tangled up in seaweed. And then it just stops randomly, which doesn't make sense to me. I thought maybe it's because he's a Time Lord. His blood tastes different. I didn't like it. No, it never really touches on that. It just stops killing him because it does. And then it has him find out that the survey team that had been sent ahead of him, he finds like all of their severed remains, which it gets descriptive of too, like the hollow eye sockets where eyes had been that waited for help that never came. I'm like, okay, you don't have to go quite that far with it. Tom's narrating is great. Like, it's weird because he actually says the word awesome at some point. And hearing Tom Baker just say, and it's awesome, it's weird hearing Tom Baker say awesome. And then when he describes the light on the creatures, he goes, you know, they're dazzling light. It's something about the way he says certain words. It's just really interesting. Dazzling light. I like that. Just the way he reads the script. Just something about it. And then he discovers a burnout spaceship because they thought a meteor landed. He finds out it's a spaceship that landed long time ago, even though he recognizes the spaceship. And then he sees this kind of fish creature howling and coming right at him. And he goes, I had to get away. He's underwater. How he's not dying from, I assume he's in some kind of suit if he's underwater. So how he's not dying from the water. He goes, I had to get away. And then it cuts to Sarah was helping me up out of the water. I'm like, how did you get away? It goes from this creature that's like half shark or fish or whatever, which probably swims better than he does. Then again, he's a Time Lord, who knows? And he's like in this like underground tunnel, and I assume it's coming from the entrance. And he says it goes from I had to get away to him getting out of the water. I feel like I'm missing something here. Like, this whole story feels like an outline with just the major plot points, and it goes from plot point to plot point to plot point to plot point. And all of the stuff that happens between an outline and an actual story isn't there. And then it talks about the creature and how it's a sea creature, and being out of the water it dies after it ravages the countryside. By the way, the incidental music for this is god-awful. It doesn't fit the tone of the story. It's this awful, generic synthesizer sounds. That one sounds like it would be better in an 80s story. It would still sound terrible. It's so generic and awful. But it sounds like it would be more appropriate for an 80s story in what is basically has the feel of a Hinchcliffe 70s horror story. This weird synth sound noise is way out of place and very irritating. And also the sound mixing feels off, so it's very loud. Like sometimes I have trouble telling what Tom is saying. Again, I'm trying to keep in mind that this was made in 1976. It's, I think, the first Doctor Who audio story. It's not going to have the refinement of the stuff Big Finish is churning out today. I get that. It's like someone who watches modern who started with like the Matt Smith or Capaldi era, going back and watching Classic Who and having to adjust to the fact that Classic Who looks different. The special effects are done different. They're done in a more primitive way. The budget is lower. You know, you're not going to watch an episode from John Pertwee's era and have it look like Ncuti Gatwa's era. It's just not going to happen. You have to, if you're someone who starts with Modern Who, especially later Modern Who, because even some of early Modern Who looks dated now, let's be honest. If you're someone who started, say, with Matt Smith or up, and that's what you're used to watching, and you're going to Classic Who for the first time, there are just certain concessions you're going to have to make. There are just a certain understanding you have to have about what you're getting into. And I'm trying to keep that kind of mentality in mind when listening to this. But it's still just dreadful in places with that music. There's even one point when it's like somebody playing on a synthesizer piano keyboard and they roll their fingers down it like that. You know, like when somebody rolls their hand just all the way down the piano, that they do that right when they're doing a thing, and they do that randomly. And again, the mixing's bad, so it's loud. And right after they do it, screaming starts, because that's like right when the creature's killing people, and the screaming is loud. And so I'm alternating, especially since it's like 10 or 11 at night, I'm alternating between trying to turn the volume up so I can hear Tom when he's talking, and turning the volume down when there's this loud, crappy incidental music and a lot of screaming going on. And it's very irritating. Very, very irritating. And this just got harder and harder to get through, partially because of that. The creature killed a bunch of people. And then it was, since it's a saltwater creature and it couldn't get back in the salt water for some reason, it passes out and dies. But it doesn't. And Tom's like, he warns people, you know, I warn people not to go, but slowly more people go. And eventually when a crowd's around it, that's when it decides to wake up and start killing again randomly. Did a 5-year-old write this? No, and it's not, because I think Victor wrote this. And Victor also, I think, also wrote Fury from the Deep. To be fair, this has a Fury from the Deep feel to it, especially when it mentions seaweed at the beginning. It feels like a rough draft, like an outline. It feels like the first 5 minutes of it were written, and Victor either ran out of time or he just stopped caring. And he said, screw it. And threw his outline he had for the story for the rest of it, because it just moves from plot point to plot point to plot point. Because then the creature runs away. It gets into like an aquarium. You figured it would hop in one of the saltwater tanks, because that's what the doctor talks about. It found what it's been craving. Salt water, what it needs. So the doctor follows it in, but it's dark. He can't see it. Until he can see it, it smashes a fish tank. Water pours down. The doctor gets ready to run, but then the water hits the creature and it dies. I don't know, is it fresh water? And it dissolves and disintegrates. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I don't know what's going on. It just outline point, outline point, outline point, outline point, outline point. None of the stuff in the middle is there. None of the stuff that turns an outline into a story is there. Tom's performance is great. But just the stuff happening doesn't make sense. It goes in there because it wants salt water. Instead, it gets hit by water and then dissolves. Is it fresh water? Like, I was so disappointed from part 1. This video was going to be a review of part 1 and then part 2. I was going to watch part 1, part 2, edit them together. But by the time I finished the 22 minutes of part 1, which felt like a lot longer than 22 minutes, part of that was me pausing because I had to stop sometimes. I knew I could not immediately move on to part 2 because that would just be torturing myself. I'd have to be punishing myself for something. And like, I even took the disc out of the Xbox. Like, usually I'll leave the disc in if I'm going to come back to another part later. Like, maybe I'll watch it tomorrow. I just leave the disc in there. The fact that I took the disc out and put it back in the case and put the case back up is my way of thinking to myself, it might be a little minute before I move on to part 2. Something to listen to in like 2039 or something. I'm sure it'll be sooner than that. I do want to actually see how it ends and hope maybe it gets better. But I was so disappointed by part 1 that I don't have the jumping urge to listen to part 2, because a lot of times in audios I kind of want to jump in on it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes, you know, I just get caught up doing other stuff, so it does take a minute to get through audio. Like the Klein trilogy. I like the Klein trilogy, but it still took me a second to get through all of them, just because I had other stuff going on. But like, I figured I had intended to listen to both parts tonight, and after part 1 I was like, nah, I don't think so. It's just, those first 5 minutes are really good. Maybe 5 minutes. That first little bit when Tom narrates and him and Sarah talk are really good. I liked it. I enjoyed that. And then after that, I don't know what happened with the script. It just went like off a cliff. Not even a slope, a cliff. It just went. I mean, I can't even call it a slide because like it's straight down. You need a parachute. Your butt will not even be touching dirt sliding down. You need a parachute. Yeah, I didn't care for it. Which, you know, I've heard Slipback before, which is another story that came out during Classic Who's original run during the 6th Doctor era. And I like Slipback. I reviewed Slipback back when I first got, what was it, the season 23 box set. I think it came out on the 22 box set, whichever one it was it came out on. I liked Slipback a lot. Thought it was a good story. It has Valentine in it, which is always awesome. His voice is amazing. So I was kind of hoping this would be something like that, because there is a good story in there. It has a very Hinchcliffe era styled story there. It just, and the Elizabeth and Tom, great performances. But that incidental music, totally wrong for this type of story. It just feels rushed, like they didn't put a lot of thought in there. It's generic. It's bad. And then the story, just after those first 5 minutes, it just, okay, we go to this plot point, to this plot point, to this plot point, to this plot point. Like, it has worse editing problems than Legend of the Sea Devils. I didn't know that was possible for a Doctor Who story. It's like they recorded it to originally be longer and something happens and it just got chopped up in the edit. Bad. It's like the audio equivalent of Legend of the Sea Devils. It was really hard to get through. Really, really hard to get through. So the Pescatons, or whatever it's called. What did you think of the first part of it? Is the second part better? Please tell me the second part's better. Lie if you have to and tell me the second part's better. Comment down below and let's talk about it. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button as well. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me on that. There's a link to that down there. My P.O. box is down there if there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review. A link to my Amazon wish list is down there. A link to my Amazon UK wish list is down there for stuff I would absolutely love to get and review, including some more of these standard edition sets, which I really like and really appreciate Simon sending. I want to give a shout out to Colin Coney and Sam Venning, 2 of my top tier patrons. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons and my YouTube members. It's very much appreciated. And most importantly, thank you for watching.